You should divorce your husband immediately." "What?" She said that and showed me a footage on a surveillance camera. This is... I was shocked when I saw the footage. For a moment, I even forgot to breathe. I can't forgive this. I mean, who could? How they can deceive me like this? I felt the anger welled up within me. That's when I promised myself that I will definitely get revenge. My name is Amber, a 39-year-old office worker. I've been married to my husband Erwin for 10 years. We had been living harmoniously as a working couple, earning a stable income. Since the marriage, we had trouble conceiving a child. Our married life hasn't been easy. There have been challenges besides the issue of having children. It happened unexpectedly. My husband was diagnosed with early-onset dementia about a year ago. At first, it was just forgetting things when we went out together. I thought he was just absent-minded. But then he started forgetting how to drive or even forgetting to go to work. And things became more unsettling. Eventually, he started asking me if dinner was ready right after we finished eating, or if the bath was ready every few minutes. Of course, it also affected his work. Because of that, I decided to have him undergo tests. I consulted Carrie, my close friend since middle school. She's a nurse, so I thought she might have some knowledge about dementia testing. She immediately arranged for her acquaintance, a doctor, to see my husband. After the examination, it was confirmed that he had early-onset dementia. I was speechless and filled with despair. I didn't know what to do or what to say. Of course, my husband is not at fault. Thinking that, I regained my strength moving forward. We have to overcome this together as a couple. I made up my mind that I would become the pillar of the family from now on. Since then, I have been working desperately. My husband quit his job. We arranged for caregiving service for him during the day. If you give it your all, you'll get results. In this past year, I was promoted to department manager. My salary increased significantly, and I could easily afford the cost of my husband's care. During that time, the hospital where we used to go for regular checkups closed down. I wasn't sure why, but rumor has it that it was mismanagement, embezzlement. Whatever the case, I wasn't sure. Carrie had referred to this hospital. I was at a loss. I was pretty disappointed because my husband and I were just getting used to this hospital. Besides, I had to find another good hospital for my husband's examination. I was also getting pretty busy at work, so I was always on edge. I didn't want to bother Carrie again, so I couldn't talk to her about it. Spending each day with a sense of urgency, my husband's symptoms seemed to be getting worse day by day. I felt like suffocating every morning when I woke up. At that time, I received a message from my best friend Sarah, who had returned to the country saying she wanted to meet. It was like a helping hand. Just the fact that I can meet someone I can talk to. Amber! Long time no see, honey. Sarah, here. Good to see you. You've got a Latina vibe going on, huh? Huh, really? I've been living with my Brazilian boyfriend for a while, so maybe that's why. We broke up a couple months ago, though. Oh, sorry, honey. No, I'm okay, really. Besides, I was invited to work at a university hospital here, so I decided to come back. Sarah is a doctor and has been moving around overseas. Sarah and I grew up almost like sisters because we lived next door to each other when we were kids. We were both only child, so we were always together at school and after school. Growing up, Sarah was like my family to me, and I could talk to her about anything. We would often stay up late talking about boyfriends, schoolwork, and such. When I was in high school, her family moved away and we didn't see each other as much as we used to, but our friendship continued. This was the first time in a few years since we last met each other, and I was very excited. After catching up for a while, I told Sarah about my husband's situation. I see. If you were looking for a hospital for regular checkups, how about the one where I work? I can introduce you to a good doctor. Really? That would be incredibly helpful. Please, I'd appreciate it. A few days later, Sarah sent the necessary documents to my house. Erwin, from now on, we'll be doing our regular checkups here, okay? I said that and placed the documents in front of my husband. For a brief moment, I noticed a surprised expression on his face. I felt a slight sense of unease, but I didn't pay too much attention to it, and I took my husband to the hospital. Wait, Carrie? Amber? What are you doing here? Does this happen to be your workplace? I asked Carrie, who was wearing a nurse's uniform. Yes. Didn't I tell you? I work at this university hospital. Oh, I see. What a coincidence, huh? Having two friends and trustworthy friends working at the same hospital is reassuring. By the way, it seems like the hospital I told you has closed down. I'm sorry about that. Oh, it's okay. Don't worry about that. So, how is your husband doing? Well, for now, he's stable. That's good. Well, I'll take him to the examination room, since I'll be the one attending to him. Okay, thank you. Carrie said that and headed to the examination room with my husband. I decided to go to the nearby cafe to pass the time. Amber? I turned around and saw Sarah standing there. Oh, hey, Sarah. Sarah, you look great in a white coat. It's the first time I've ever seen you like this. But it suits you. Despite my comment, Sarah had a stern expression on her face for some reason. Then she suddenly said something unexpected to me. Amber, you should divorce your husband immediately. Huh? Why all of a sudden? What do you mean by saying we should get a divorce? I don't understand at all. What do you mean? I mean, why should I? Yeah, you see, actually, I saw it. You saw? So what? Your husband. I saw the nurse and your husband going into a room that only authorized personnel can enter. Nurse? Oh, you mean Carrie? Anyway, I didn't recognize her. But it's not a place for taking patients, so I got curious and followed them. I couldn't see much inside, but I could hear their voices. Well, you know, those two seem to be having a, intimate relationship. But what? That's... No. Because Erwin has dementia. And that nurse is my close friend. Huh? In fact, Sarah and Carrie don't know about each other. Hey, Amber, is it true that your husband has dementia? What? There have been cases where they pretended to have one, It happens more often than you think. I couldn't believe her words. Could it be that everything was just an act? But I couldn't imagine Sarah, the doctor, lying. And she had no reason to lie to me. I didn't know what to believe anymore. Sarah said she would keep an eye on things and went back to work. After a while, Carrie and my husband returned. We're done with the regular checkups. I'll mail you the documents later. Oh, okay. From then on, I spent my days feeling unsettled. I even confirmed with the caregiver, who mentioned that my husband indeed showed symptoms and made remarks consistent with dementia. However, at that moment, the caregiver seemed to remember something. Oh, now that I think about it, when I arrived at your house, your husband was on the phone. The way he was speaking was very clear and confident. I see. Thank you for letting me know. As my doubts grew stronger, I received a call from Sarah. I immediately went to the cafe she mentioned. "Take a look at this." Saying that, she showed me a video captured by a surveillance camera. This can't be true. Watching the footage, I was shocked. It showed Carrie and my husband engaging in intimate acts in various rooms of the hospital. It was making rumor recently. There were reports of rooms being found dirty, even though they were supposed to be cleaned. So, I reported it to the police, saying it might be a case of foul play. I managed to get access to the surveillance footage. I'm sorry for showing you this kind of video. No, I appreciate it. You've given me solid evidence. With this, I have no more doubts. I was filled with anger towards my husband and Carrie. After that, I immediately consulted with a lawyer. With more than enough evidence in hand, it seemed like I would have the upper hand in the divorce. Once everything was prepared, I took my husband to the hospital and led him to the prepared room. Of course, I invited Carrie there too. This is the lawyer I hired for this matter. As I said that, Carrie and my husband next to her were both shocked. Then the door to the room opened, and Sarah walked in.
"Wait, doctor? Why are you here?"
Carrie wondered why Sarah had entered, sounding puzzled. "Amber is my high school friend. I know about you two having an affair."
What? What are you talking about?
Well, unfortunately, the two of you have no room for defense. Saying that, the lawyer played the video. Carrie panicked, and my husband was sweating profusely. "You've been deceiving me all this time." "I must say, Erwin, your acting skills are impressive." As I said that, Sarah chimed in. "We have evidence that you've been pretending to have dementia. Carrie, you introduced Amber to a privately owned hospital with a shady doctor, right? You probably manipulated something, creating a false result that Erwin has dementia." Carrie struggled to find words. Then, realizing there was no escape, my husband suddenly began speaking clearly. Wait. Sorry. I admit I messed up. I apologize, but please, don't divorce me." "What? You're joking, right? I will definitely divorce you, and you will pay alimony. Moreover, engaging in such acts in a hospital room multiple times, both of you will likely face fines." This can't be. Carrie, was it? What on earth are you doing in a sacred place where lives are dealt with? Have some shame. I've already reported this to the hospital director. You're getting fired for sure. Carrie and my husband turned pale and bowed their heads in shame. Afterward, I officially finalized the divorce with my husband and pursued alimony from both him and Carrie. My husband tried to rely on his family, but they were furious at him for pretending to have dementia and cut off all contact. Now he lives in a run-down apartment, working temporarily jobs to slowly pay off the alimony. Carrie is in a similar situation, being estranged from her family and unable to find employment at any hospital. However, they brought this upon themselves, so there is no room for sympathy. I later found out that they had been involved in a relationship for several years. Carrie, who fell in love with Erwin at our wedding, had secretly continued to seduce him. And Erwin didn't seem to have any qualms about indulging in the attention. But their secret, thrilling relationship quickly came to an end once the downfall began after the divorce. I hope they will pay the price for what they have done for the rest of their lives. On the other hand, I moved to a condo near my workplace and started a new life. Being single now, I can save a considerable amount of money. I've grown weary of love and relationship for a while. I'm grateful to Sarah, who came to my rescue during the crisis. As two financially stable single women, perhaps we'll go on a trip together and indulge in luxury.
My husband of 20 years taken by a younger woman. After his remarriage, I enlightened the new wife about the upcoming reality.
Hi, I'm Lauren, and I'm 49 years old. I've been married to Ethan for the better part of 20 years, and with our son flying the nest for college last year, I've had some extra time on my hands. With our son's expenses, though, I started a part-time gig. Being a stay-at-home mom since our son was born, it was a little rough at first, like a fish out of water. But lately, my work's been picking up my ideas, and it felt great being part of the team. I even piped up to Ethan, who was zoned out on the TV. Hey, Ethan, guess who's getting a pay bump? It's nice to have the hard work noticed, you know? But then out of nowhere, Ethan pipes up with, So, you think you can make it on your own now? I thought maybe I'd misheard his casual chatter, but when I asked for clarity, he looks me dead in the eye and drops a bombshell.
I've been meaning to tell you this.
His smug smirk sent chills down my spine.
I found someone else. Cuter. Don't need you anymore.
I was floored.
Do us a favor and pick up the divorce papers and a new marriage license from the city office tomorrow,
he says, as if he's talking about the weather. I was lost for words. What the hell are you talking about? So he's dumping me for some chick, and he's planning to marry her? As the reality of the situation began to sink in, I could feel myself shaking. Ethan just laughed in my face.
I can still live as a man, unlike you, who seems to have forgotten what it's like to be a woman. We've been like roommates for years, so why keep pretending?
His words were a slap in the face. It's not that I've lost my femininity, it's just hard to feel any attraction towards an overweight middle-aged slob. Anger bubbled up inside me, but all I could do was laugh. Tired, busy, too much trouble. You're the one who's been avoiding me. And now you want to live it up as some macho man? Oh, please. He snapped.
What's so funny? Watch your mouth, old lady.
He barked, throwing all sorts of insults my way. He leaned back, arms folded, gloating.
Adriana is a different story. She thinks I'm the best boyfriend. She's proud of me. But you're all about work and promotions. Is that all that makes you happy?
Ethan kept going on about his new squeeze, Adriana, and the way he belittled me stung like a bee. Adriana? Sounds like a mistress name if I ever heard one. Ethan carried on with a chest-puffing speech about Adriana's glamorous nightlife job and how she's over a decade younger than him, in her mid-20s. The icing on the cake? She's carrying his child. I mean, age gap marriages aren't exactly rare these days, but the thought of a soon-to-be dad of a 20-year-old knocking up a woman barely older than his own kid? Just sickening.
You need love in life,
he said with an air of grandeur.
Not with someone cold and stale like you, but with someone fresh and warm like Adriana. If love doesn't last with her, it's not worth the dime.
My husband started ranting like a madman, his words tumbling over each other. So that's his game? Buying affection with cash? He conveniently forgets his own age, picking a fresh-faced young thing So you've ditched me for a reckless young girl who doesn't blink at messing around with a married man for his money. When I threw this in his face, he snapped back.
It's not about the cash. I've told you, it's love. In any case, I mean business. I gotta marry Adriana pronto. Make her feel secure. You just pack up your stuff and beat it.
His audacity was something else. It left me dumbstruck. But then the hilarity of it all started to seep in. I mean, when was the last time he even mentioned the word love? I bet you dollars to donuts he'll soon be as indifferent to this Adriana as he is to me. With time, as age creeps in, these ephemeral emotions fade. Heck, those nasty words he's hurling at me will be aimed at her next. Honestly, Ethan, you're a sad sight. I should have seen this coming before we tied the knot. Looking back, I managed all the household chores and child rearing single-handedly. Far from lending a hand, he turned into Mr. Critic, highlighting all my shortcomings. Despite living in times when such behavior was deemed normal, he never once showed appreciation, let alone expressed love. And now he's tossing me aside, the woman who's busted her hump for him, for some younger model. His sanity was a real question mark. But Ethan brushed off my words as nothing more than sour grapes.
If that's the case, there's no problem, right? Anyway, get those papers ready by next week. Make sure you've got everything,
he said before retreating to his man cave. For several days, I spent countless sleepless nights, tears of frustration refusing to dry up. I tried to put on a brave face, but on his day off, Ethan had the nerve to invite his mistress to our house.
Hola, Ethan's ex-wife. I'm here to help with the paperwork,
said Adriana, humming a tune and lounging on our sofa with her legs crossed. As Ethan mentioned, her skin looked smooth, and her looks oozed confidence. The heavy makeup and the risque clothes suited her nightlife job. A dangerously plunging neckline and a skirt so short it'd make even a woman like me blush. But I could tell she didn't love my husband. If my gut was right, she was here for one thing. I had already steeled myself for a divorce. I faced her. I had no intention of fighting back, but something about her demeanor bothered me. So, you're Adriana, right? You started seeing him knowing full well he was taken? By calling me an ex, you do understand what you're stepping into, right? She giggled.
I'm not an idiot, lady. Don't look down on me. You're the soon-to-be has-been. I'm his soon-to-be missus. See? Simple stuff.
She smugly smirked at me with a slurred voice. Gotcha. Thanks for spelling it out. And good thing I got all that recorded. So you do realize I can now demand alimony from you, right? I showed her the recorder that had been capturing every word of our conversation. She rolled her eyes and shot a complaint at my husband.
E-man, you promised the old bat wouldn't butt in. You've gone back on your word.
My husband tried to calm the agitated woman.
Chill, laddie. I've got this all under control.
E-man? Hattie? Listening to them was like nails on a chalkboard. While I cringed, my husband produced some paperwork.
Here, sign the divorce papers with these terms.
It laid out the specifics of our divorce, including alimony and splitting the pension.
Wait, you're handling over $300,000 to this old lady? That's gonna bite into my portion.
Without any prodding, she blatantly spilled out her true intentions.
My cut's getting smaller,
she kept repeating. It all clicked. She was eyeing the inheritance my husband was about to receive from his late father.
Easy, Addie. This includes child support too.
To Ethan's forgiving eyes, even her bare-faced attitude appeared charming.
So, it's like hush money. Quite a sum.
I grappled to keep my rising anger in check. And nevertheless, I felt a sense of reassurance. My intuition had been spot on. If you can put the divorce terms into a notarial deed, that works for me. And I'd like the payment in one go, please. I put in, keeping my response to the bare minimum. My husband agreed to these conditions, fully aware our conversation was being recorded.
Happy now?
Encouraged by the woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, we completed the divorce papers.
Listen, old lady, I need you out by the end of the month. I've already cancelled my lease, she stated.
I'll file the divorce papers once the notarial deed is ready. I'll move out right after that's done, I answered back. It seemed she was all set to move in ASAP, so she grumbled a bit before reluctantly taking off. After a bit, the notarial deed was processed, and our divorce was officially in the works. And just as expected, the woman came to give me the boot.
Come on, shake a leg. Stop dragging your feet and get moving.
She was practically giddy as she announced.
I just submitted the marriage license. I'm now E-Man's wife. This gorgeous house is all mine.
Prancing around like she owned the place. I reluctantly handed over the front door key, but I had a question I wanted to clarify, so I asked. Isn't Ethan around the same age as your folks? If you're calling me an old lady, then Ethan, who's older than me, should be an old geezer. Why'd you pick him as your husband? Her unabashed response matched my predictions to a T.
E-Man is a big shot at a top-tier company. This house is a cool, detached place close to the station, fresh off a recent remodel. And the furniture, I'll just replace it to suit my taste.
She was lost in a dream.
E-Man treats me like a queen. He's not exactly a stud and he's an old guy, but he says he'll buy me anything I want.
She was smirking at me as if she had her future set in stone, the picture of smug satisfaction. I hope it all pans out for you, I muttered, sighing as I left the house that had been my home for so many years. I ended up moving into a dormitory at a certain university. It was pretty rare these days, but they hired me as a live-in dorm mother. Actually, up until that point, I was working part-time in a corporate cafeteria. But when Ethan and I split up, I thought it was time for a change and set off for new beginnings in a different place. When I let my boss in on what was happening, they went to bat for me with upper management, probably because they'd always valued my work ethic. Right at that moment, a position opened up due to someone retiring. I was thankful for the opportunity and accepted the job at the dormitory. I was truly grateful for my nutritionist certification then. The rent and utilities were a total steal. Even though I didn't get much free time to hang out, it was a great place to work, and I enjoyed my job. Fast forward 3 months into my new life, and guess who rings me up? My ex-husband. He said,
Mom's really struggling. Can you lend a hand with her care?
I couldn't believe the gall of him to even ask. We're pretty much strangers now. Shouldn't your new wife be the one stepping up? When I pointed out the obvious, he said,
But Adriana is pregnant and it's dangerous because Mom's got dementia and starts throwing stuff.
As if it's okay for her to hurl things at me instead? That logic blew my mind, but no way was I going for it. I told him, point blank, we're not a part of each other's lives anymore. Don't call me again. Now, don't get me wrong. She'd been my mother-in-law for 20 years since we got hitched, and it wasn't like we were constantly at each other's throats or anything. But we weren't exactly besties either. And hello, I just started living on my own. I didn't have time to go help out at someone else's place. But somehow, Ethan figured out where I was, and he and his new wife showed up at my door. He said,
"We can't handle it. If you can't help with the care, give back the alimony we paid."
I was astounded he'd even say that. I responded coolly, "I really don't think I owe you guys anything." Then his wife gave me this nasty glare.
You knew and tricked us, didn't you? The inheritance I was counting on is nothing, and moreover, it's all debt.
She tossed a bunch of paperwork at me and documents scattering everywhere as she let loose a tirade. How dare you accuse me of tricking you? You just jumped to the conclusion that he was loaded, didn't you? Good grief. I gave an exaggerated shrug. True, when I was dealing with my late father-in-law's estate, I discovered Ethan was up to his eyeballs in debt. In a normal situation, I could have simply declined the inheritance, but Ethan, in all his wisdom, had already cancelled his dad's cell service and hawked his household goods and jewelry for quick cash before we even got the ball rolling. You see, there's a law in this county stating that if you've messed with the estate before declining an inheritance, you can't back out, and that's exactly what went down. So guess who ended up shouldering the debt? Ethan and his darling new wife. Feeling a bit smug, I said, "Ethan, you dumped the whole inheritance mess on me and never bothered to ask questions." And guess what, Adriana? He pawned off that property just to keep you in the picture. When I let that one fly, he was like,
"You should have told me such an important thing."
But I was already a step ahead. It's you who should have been asking questions. You both are going to have to own up to this.
What? I don't know anything about that, and I didn't hear anything.
His wife went sheet white and started panicking.
"So you're just gonna play dumb, pocket the cash, and bolt?"
They both started pushing, but honestly, it's not my circus. You're spouting some wild nonsense, you realize? If you had kept it in your pants, you wouldn't have had to hustle for your mistress's sake, and you could have easily said no thanks to the inheritance. You're the mastermind behind this whole debacle. I shot back. He grunted and reeled back, as if I'd hit a nerve. And you, Adriana, knew the guy was married, went after his dough, even had a kid, and kicked me to the curb. You're in this pickle because you asked for it. I gave it to her straight, a woman young enough to be my own child.
If I had known it would end up like this, I wouldn't have cozied up to some old geezer.
But I wasn't done yet. Do you remember the divorce decree? All I got from Ethan was alimony, a slice of his pension, and child support. But apart from that, I have every right to claim damages from you.
What? Isn't $300,000 enough for you? You're just plain greedy.
She shrieked, hurling curses at me in shock. You bet. I would have let bygones be bygones if you two, who've got nothing to do with me now, had just let me live my life. But no, you've got to go twisting things around, demanding that I look after Ethan's mother, asking for alimony back. Totally out of line. Even I have my limits. When I dropped the bomb that I had recorded all our talks about the divorce and intended to go after damages full throttle, she sprinted away without a backward glance. As I watched her retreat, I turned to Ethan, who was still rooted to the spot, gobsmacked. Can she even run like that in the final trimester? Is she really preggers? And now that she's bolted, where's the so-called love? My questions left him at a loss for words.
"I messed up. Please, come back."
His teary-eyed pleading only made him look even more worn out. No, Dice. Time for you to hit the road.
Lauren.
His voice cracked and he broke down. My ex-husband looked utterly pitiful, but given his past actions, sympathy was out of the question. As I figured, Adriana vanished into thin air, leaving only the divorce papers behind. Apparently, even her pregnancy was a lie. My ex got stuck dealing with the debt and his mom's care all by his lonesome, and from what I heard, he's practically withered away from the stress and burnout. As for me, I've found my groove as a dorm mother, looking after kids the same age as my son. People have even been saying lately that I look years younger. I plan on keeping my feet on the ground, steering clear of trouble, and living life with a straight arrow. Folks, tread carefully when it comes to divorce.
We got takeout meat at in-laws, but I got only mac and cheese. My husband, it was a mistake. Don't be petty. But I'm leaving because I want to.
I'm Molly, a 38-year-old with a husband named Bill. Now, Bill is the eldest of 3 brothers. His younger siblings, Mike and Drew, are both married with a kid each. They're both good as gold. Same goes for their wives. Honestly, they're the sweetest. You hear about in-law drama, but not in my life. I've lucked out with a great bunch and we all get along just fine. There is a fly in the ointment, though, my mother-in-law. When Bill and I tied the knot, she was a delight. Julia, she's called, always with a friendly smile. I thought I hit the jackpot with her as a mother-in-law. My father-in-law, who's since passed away, was also around when Bill and I got hitched. He was a real gem, too. I remember thinking just how lucky I was to marry into such a great family. However, a few years into our marriage, Mike and Drew both got hitched, and before long, both their wives were expecting. That's when the winds shifted with Julia. It began with small things. Bill and I were living in an apartment just a hop, skip, and a jump away from his parents, and we'd pop by regularly. One day, out of the blue, the coffee they used to serve me just stopped. I thought maybe Julia had simply forgotten, so I asked her, "Could you pour me a cup of coffee?" Her response was a harsh, "Don't ask every time. Think for yourself. You're so intrusive." I never heard such words from her before. It knocked me for 6, and all I could muster was an apology. Looking back, I think that might have been the starting point. Julia began pointing fingers at me for not having a child and started being outright mean. And Bill? Not a word against him. She seemed to coddle him even more. Maybe he liked being the apple of his mother's eye, but he turned a blind eye to the way I was being treated. Whenever I sought help, he'd act as if nothing was amiss. This ordeal went on for years. Then one day, we were celebrating Lena's 4th birthday, Mike's little girl. We were all getting together at my in-laws for a birthday bash. As we pulled up with gifts in tow, we found everyone else was already there. In a tone feigning concern, Julia asked Bill, "You're late. Are you okay?" When I piped up, "I'm sorry, the rows were busy," she retorted, "I wasn't asking you. I bet you were just slow getting ready. Don't bother my son. Your makeup doesn't change a thing." Her words took the wind out of my sails. Bill saw it all, but as always didn't lift a finger and made a beeline for the house. You'd think he could say something, anything. Holding on to that vain hope, I trailed after him. As we stepped into the room, the gang was all there. And Lena, the birthday girl and star of the day, darted over to me, beaming. Molly!" As I wished her a happy birthday, she replied, "Thanks for coming," with an innocent smile. And for a moment, my heart found a little peace. Just then, Julia, who clearly wasn't too thrilled about my chat with Lena, muttered under her breath.
Quit gabbing and start helping with the prep, would ya?
I mumbled an apology and made a beeline for the kitchen. There I found Nicole, my sister-in-law, and mom to little Lena. Drew's wife, the newest addition to our family, had to bail due to some unavoidable stuff she had going on today. "Hey Nicole, sorry I'm late. Need a hand?" I asked. She waved it off saying, "No worries. Julia said we're getting Uber Eats today, so we just needed to get 8 plates. I've got it covered, so you can chill." I thought there'd be heaps to do. Guess Julia was just cheesed off that I was having a blast with Lena. Together, Nicole and I carried the plates and cutlery to the table and got it ready for the family. That's when Julia decided to drop her surprise.
"The Uber Eats is here with some roast beef. Since it's Lena's big day, I thought we could splash out a bit,"
she said, looking rather chuffed. We served the roast beef and bam, we were ready to roll. Everyone started taking their seats as per Julia's seating chart. Bill, my husband, found his seat next to Mike, so I tried to slide in next to him, but Julia was quick to intervene.
"Hold your horses, Molly. Bill's next to Mike. You can't sit there."
I was flummoxed. Where should I sit then?" I asked, but she didn't say anything. In the end, I was left standing like a lemon. After a bit, Julia was all,
"Well, shall we dig in?"
But I was still on my feet, and for some weird reason, there wasn't a roast beef in sight for me. Julia, where do I tried to ask, but she interjected.
"Oh, you're still there. I forgot. Grab any spot that's free, okay?"
Hearing this, I plonked down at the very last seat, but there was just a small plate and a fork, no roast beef. I had a sinking feeling, but still took a shot. Julia, I'm missing a roast beef."
"Oh, looks like I messed up the count when I ordered. My bad, Molly. How about some mac and cheese?"
she suggested, grinning like a Cheshire cat. Mac and cheese? I echoed, baffled.
"Yeah, we've got some leftovers from last night in the fridge. Just zap it in the microwave,"
she said casually. I was taken aback, but Julia, as chill as ever, called out,
"Let's eat,"
and started tucking in. Everyone else seemed a bit gobsmacked, but even Bill started carving into his meat. I sighed and heated up the leftover mac and cheese and dug in. Just then, Nicole, who was sat next to me, whispered, "Hey, sis, let's go halves on mine." "But I feel bad," I started, but she cut in. "Don't sweat it. It's weird that you're the only one without any. I can't polish off this beast on my own anyway." I thanked her and was about to nick a slice of her beef when Julia hollered,
"Wait! What do you think you're doing? Nicole, you're still young and planning on kid number 2, right? You've gotta eat right,"
she said, stopping me from taking a bite out of Nicole's portion. "But, Julia, Molly's food is..." Nicole tried to step in for me, but Julia cut her off.
"It's fine. Molly doesn't seem keen on having any kids,"
she retorted. A smirk plastered across her face as she gauged my reaction. Feeling bad for Nicole, who'd been dragged into this, I replied, "I'm sorry, Nicole. I'm good, really. I appreciate the thought, though. Thanks a lot." As I said that, Nicole looked like she wanted to say something, pain flickering across her face, but I chose to ignore it and dug into my reheated mac and cheese. Even I could see how miserable I was looking, being the only one at this happy get-together stuck with mac and cheese. But hey, it's not like I was in any position to kick up a fuss. So I just bit the bullet and chowed down on the mac and cheese. Then it was time for the gift-giving bit with Lena. I'd managed to snag something she'd been itching to have, but as I went to hand it over to her, my husband Bill swoops in and takes it off me, giving it to Lena himself. And to make things worse, my mother-in-law was smirking at the whole scene. And here I was, the one who'd trekked to the store and put down the cash for the gift. Helena, however, responded with a heartfelt,
"Thank you."
and promptly ripped into the wrapping paper. The moment she caught sight of what was inside, she let out an excited,
"Wow!"
and rushed over to me.
Molly, this is what I said I wanted. You remembered. Thank you."
My quick on her feet mother-in-law Julia jumped in though.
"Helena, it wasn't Molly who bought that for you, it was Bill." "No way! I only told Aunt Molly that I wanted this. Uncle couldn't know that. Grandma, aren't you being weird?"
Lena defended me, thanking me over and over again. I gotta say, her words were a real lifesaver. But not everyone was a fan, namely my husband and his mom. They'd been shooting daggers at me the entire time Lena was thanking me. While I was deep in conversation with Lena, Julia pipes up.
"Let's dig into the cake now. Molly, could you be a doll and carry it over?"
With a resigned sigh, I tell Lena, "We'll pick up our chat later," and lug over the fancy cake dish, fork, and knife that Julia has singled out. The cake they brought out was a real beauty, straight from a famous bakery. Then, out of the blue, Bill pipes up.
"Mom, I've got the cake,"
he announces without even running it by me. Well, considering I got Lena's present, I suppose it's only fair that he chips in too. At least that's what I was thinking until my husband sidles up to me and whispers,
"Can you front me? It turns out I forgot to bring cash today."
My first thought was, you've gotta be kidding me. But what was done was done. Julia whispers the amount in my ear and I begrudgingly pull out my wallet and cough up the dough. Julia begins cutting the cake, handing out slices, one by one.
"Everyone ready for the cake? Dig in,"
she announces. And yet again, I had this sneaking suspicion. And yup, my piece was missing. Julia, Bill, Mike, Nicole, Lena, and Drew all had their pieces. The cake was cut into 6 equal parts. When Nicole, noticing my piece was AWOL, chimes in. "Julia, there's no cake for Molly." Julia brushes it off with a dismissive,
"It's no big deal. She could stand to lose a few pounds, and it's a shame to cut up this perfectly sliced cake again."
All this while chuckling. Nicole, feeling a bit awkward, looks down and murmurs, but I reassure her. It's all good. It's Lena's birthday after all. Enjoy without thinking twice about me. But honestly, I was at the end of my rope. I was dying to give Julia and Bill a piece of my mind, but I didn't want to sour the atmosphere on my niece's special day. However, I couldn't stomach being there a moment longer, so I quietly excused myself. I'm heading home a bit early, and left on my own. Did my husband offer to drive me home? Nope. Instead, he says,
"I'm taking the car home so you can catch the bus."
So like a good little wife, I hopped on the bus and headed home as instructed. A few hours later, Bill strolled in, clearly feeling on top of the world. My patience was threadbare by then, and I seriously demanded he do something about the day's drama. However, he shrugged it off with a laugh, saying,
"You're too sensitive. You can't live your life like that."
I reminded him I'd been left out at the dinner and the cake. But he retorted,
"Didn't my mother say she just made a few mistakes? It's just meat and cake. Don't say such pitiful things."
With that, he took himself off to our room, acting like I was the one being unreasonable. And that was the end of that conversation. My patience had always been my strong suit, but I was teetering on the edge. For the first time, I seriously contemplated divorce. I was starting to see our marriage was hanging by a thread. Fast forward a week later, I got an invite to a nearby fireworks festival. The invitees included my husband, Julia, Mike, Nicole, and Lena. Given the birthday fiasco, I wasn't too thrilled about hanging out with my husband and his mom, so I turned them down politely. However, I was told that Lena declared,
"I don't want to go unless Aunt Molly is with us."
So I grudgingly agreed to go. We planned to meet up a bit early before the fireworks kicked off to indulge in the food stalls. I wasn't really feeling hungry and was just surveying the place when Lena spotted a food stall and burst out,
"I want to eat chicken."
So we trotted over to get her some. Suddenly, we were approached by a bunch of guys with cameras who asked,
"Can we interview you?"
They were live streaming the fireworks festival on a well-known news program that I was familiar with. They wanted to showcase our seemingly harmonious family. My husband, Julia, and even Mike gave the thumbs up, so the crew got started right away aiming their questions at Lena, who was happily chomping on her fried chicken. When asked if she could polish off such a hefty chunk of chicken, she retorted,
"I'm going to give the rest to my mom and Aunt Molly."
"Mom and Aunt Molly?"
Lena held my hand and replied to the reporter's question.
"The other day was my birthday, but Aunt Molly couldn't eat any cake. Grandma always bullies Aunt Molly, so I decided to give it to her today,"
she said, a huge grin lighting up her face. The reporter awkwardly tried to switch gears, but Lena pressed on.
"Grandma is mean. On my birthday, everyone had roast beef, but Aunt Molly only had mac and cheese. I thought it was really unfair."
Hearing this, the TV crew decided to cut their losses and made a hasty exit, figuring it wasn't a good look to continue. Of course, Lena didn't mean any harm. She didn't really grasp the concept of live broadcasting and was just standing up for me. After the show aired, a torrent of messages poured in from viewers who had tuned in, berating Julia.
"How can you make your daughter-in-law eat macaroni and cheese? That's the pits. Poor thing."
And,
"I thought you had a good relationship with your daughter-in-law, but you were bullying her."
in the end, Julia and my husband took an early exit, leaving me to thoroughly enjoy the fireworks festival with Lena and the rest of her family. A couple days later, I sat down for a chat with my husband and my mother-in-law. I voiced my intention to file for divorce. My husband pleaded with me to rethink, while Julia bellowed,
"I will never allow a divorce."
But Nicole and others were ready to testify, providing evidence of my mother-in-law's bullying and my husband's failure to step in. Upon hearing this, both of them blanched and hung their heads. "Bill, you live with her," I quipped, sporting a smile, "with your mother, who you love more than me. You are a mommy's boy, after all." And with that, I bid adieu to my in-laws' house. Realizing that divorce was inevitable, my husband quickly conceded. The divorce process was surprisingly smooth, and I was soon officially free. Nowadays, I've got my own little spot in an apartment right near my office. It's a cozy place my brother used to call home. After the divorce, my ex found himself a bit strapped for cash, since I was the one footing 80% of the rent, and he wound up moving back in with his mom. Since all this went down, Lena's made it clear she doesn't want anything to do with Julia and hasn't set foot in her grandparents' house. But hey, silver lining, I've kept up a pretty steady rapport with Lena's family, meeting up with them on the regular.
"Let's celebrate my next birthday together too, Aunt Molly,"
Lena told me. Honestly, I'm already counting down the days to her next birthday.
After my husband exploded at me, he ignored me and didn't contribute to our household finances for 3 months. So I decided to take action.
I'm tired, so don't talk to me.
The person screaming at me is the person I used to treasure, who I swore my eternal love for and in front of God. Where did I go wrong? Many aimless days passed me by as I wondered that. When I checked my wallet, at the peak of my despair, all I had inside was $5. What could I do with this little money? Feeling pulled by the noise I heard at that moment, I began to run. My name is Julia. I'm 29 years old. My dad passed away long before I can remember. My mom never wanted to talk about him, so I only know my father as the man who smiles up at me from old photos. My mom is a kind person and had to raise me all on her own, so I'm sure it was tough on her. But she never cried or complained in front of me. She always had a smile on her face. I love you so, so much. I'm so grateful you were born. Maybe it's because I was raised, showered with love, I grew up unguarded and open to talk to anyone. It got to the point that people warned me that I need to be more careful and learn how to defend myself. The main reason people said that to me is that I love traveling. I always saved up my salary from my part-time job to go on solo trips when I had free time. I was so used to traveling on my own that by the time I had reached my late 20s, anywhere I'd go, I'd end up drinking with the locals. I met my husband Stuart while traveling. That day I was eating at a restaurant bar as usual. Since I was eating alone, the restaurant manager was kindly sharing all sorts of funny stories about the area with me. Stuart was sitting nearby, and he also seemed to be alone, so he naturally ended up joining our conversation. Usually, those sorts of chance meetings end as soon as I'd leave the restaurant, but since Stuart and I were both enjoyed traveling, we added each other on social media. It turns out we lived closer to each other than expected, so we began meeting regularly and ended up getting married. That's not to say that the road to our marriage was a smooth one.
So, you're Julia?
My father-in-law-to-be said that with a sharp, judgmental look in his eyes. Yes. He obviously wanted to reject our marriage. Dear, if you make a face like that, you're going to scare her. Stuart's mother came to my rescue, maybe because I was anxiously looking at the ground.
That's right, Dad. I've already decided that I will be marrying Julia.
I found out once we began dating, but Stuart's family runs a large company.
I'm not complaining or anything.
Stuart's father didn't seem to plan to force him into a marriage, but he wanted a family-oriented daughter-in-law. That's why, once Stuart turned 25, his father constantly brought him to gatherings where he thought his son could find a good girl. Stuart was pretty good looking, so he had loads of women chasing after him. But according to him, those women didn't like him for who he really was. He felt like they just liked him because he's the son of a CEO. Around that time, he met me while traveling. Stuart's father understood how Stuart felt and supported him, but he didn't expect someone who was raised by a single parent like me to appear. Stuart is kind and a bit of a softie, but once he decides something, he becomes stubborn and doesn't change his mind.
Julia, Stuart is going to take over the company one day. Are you prepared to support him when that happens?
I hesitated for a moment, but then firmly looked my father-in-law in the eyes and said, yes. However, seeing how my mother-in-law had been taking care of my father-in-law all these years, I worried that my father-in-law's definition of support is different from mine.
Okay, then when are you going to quit your job?
Huh?
You just said you would support Stuart, right? If you're working, you'll end up using your job as an excuse to not keep the house in shape. And having a job outside of the house like that will just make you full of yourself. Then you'll end up forcing your husband to help around the house. Do you really want to be a useless wife like that?
I planned to keep working until I have kids.
What?
My father-in-law's expression changed, and Stuart let out a sigh.
We have to sort things out with the company first, so let's decide this all later.
I felt a tingling in the air. Maybe it was because Stuart has spoken out so strongly. Afterwards, we ate dinner that Stuart's mom had cooked. That was so delicious. It was as if a professional had cooked it. And then we went home. As we were on our way home, the conversation came up again.
About working, do you really think it won't affect things at home?
Didn't I tell you before we got engaged that I want to continue working until we have kids?
Yeah, and that's fine and all. But I just wanted to say that, like my dad said earlier, since you selfishly decided this yourself, don't let it affect me. Well, it seems like you've prepared yourself for it.
Feeling a bit uncomfortable, I answered, "Of course." If I had answered differently then, maybe I'd be living a different life now. We officially got married. Following my father-in-law's wishes, we had a grand wedding. My friend said to me, "This is amazing, but this isn't very you. But it's beautiful." Afterwards, my daily life was so hectic that I barely remember anything from it. I would wake up early to make breakfast and lunch for Stuart. Stuart likes his breakfast to be with eggs, like an Eggs Benedict, for example, and his lunch to be homemade. He wanted his dinner to have multiple courses. My mother-in-law would sometimes check the lunch boxes I had prepared for my husband and even critique them sometimes.
"Julia, it's not very well balanced, is it?"
She spoke kindly, but she'd call me to say that about once a week. At first, I thought that my mother-in-law was calling after she'd coincidentally see Stuart's lunch when visiting him at work. But I found out that my father-in-law always wanted his lunch to be freshly made and still warm, so she'd come to deliver his lunch daily, and purposefully checked on what I gave Stuart. But I didn't want to quit my job. My mom taught me that if I quit my job, I have less options if something goes wrong. She always told me to not let a job go, especially if I like it. So I slaved away every day. I tried to relieve myself from some work around the house by getting convenient appliances or paying for help, but Stuart said,
"You're just being lazy. If you can't handle this, quit your job."
So I couldn't do any of that. By the time I finished all the housework and went to sleep every day, it was always around 1 a.m. One day, a meeting at work ended up finished later than planned. I knew it'd be impossible for me to prepare all the food Stuart expects on the table by the time he comes home, so I bought a ready-made soup from the deli counter at the grocery store on the way home. I got home, prepared other things, and then warmed up the soup. By the time Stuart had got home and taken a shower, I had prepared 2 side dishes, grilled some fish as a main course, and warmed up the soup. It was from the grocery store deli, not from a can or anything like that. I was sure it'd be okay, but part of me was worried as we sat down to eat.
"Julia, you broke your promise."
"Huh?"
"You bought this soup from somewhere, didn't you?"
"I bought it, but I added in cream and fixed it up a bit."
"Yeah, but the taste is definitely of something store-bought. I told you I like homemade food, but you don't have time to even make soup?"
At the moment, Stuart's voice sounded kind, so I misunderstood his question as him caring about me. I had emotionally and physically reached my limit. I began to reveal how hard I felt my life was and how little time I had. "I've reached my limit. I barely have time to sleep. Not that I hate housework or don't want to do it, but I just don't have time. But my work is important to me." I wanted to completely express my feelings to Stuart.
"Okay, I see."
About 15 minutes had passed. Stuart said that and nodded, and I looked at him with a relieved smile. "You really understand how I feel? Then in that case..."
"The problem will be solved once you quit your job, right?"
"Huh? What?"
"So quit. If you have more time, you won't have to break your promises to me. You don't want to waste time crying like this, do you?"
Me expressing my feeling was a waste of time to him. That was the first time I felt real despair. Stuart was convinced all I had to do was quit my job. I realized he didn't care about my feelings at all. I get it. I'm sorry for saying weird things, I'm just tired. Forget what I said. I won't quit my job. I made a mistake. I thought the soup would be fine since it wasn't from a can. I'll make it myself next time. I tried getting to Stuart's heart that way, but he wouldn't change his mind. Stuart is the type to clam up if he gets mad. I ignored that he had told me to quit my job, but it seems he told his parents because they began to tell me to do the same. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and I quit. I thought that afterwards, if I just did well around the house, our relationship would improve. But our relationship just got even more rocky.
What's with this food? What are you doing?
I'm sorry.
Shouldn't things be better now that you quit your job? Why are you trying to make me mad like this?
No, that's not...
Those who don't work shouldn't eat. You aren't useful, so you don't deserve anything.
That night, when he got angry at what I cooked, he told me to give him my debit card for our bank account. Why?
You are useless, so if I give you access to our money like this, you'll probably just waste it.
His logic made absolutely no sense, but since I had quit my job, the only people I ever got in contact with were him and his parents, so my willpower had weakened. I thought I was a useless person who just causes trouble for everyone around me. I used to be better. I began to feel like the harder I worked, the more useless I was becoming. No matter what I do, it's for nothing because I have no value as a person. I even began thinking things like that. Stuart told me I could only buy things online, and he would double-check before I made any purchase. Shopping became something I did with a feeling of urgency. One day I noticed I had run out of makeup, so I asked Stuart if I could buy some more.
Excuse me, don't ask for useless things like that.
Maybe I had asked him at the wrong moment because he angrily replied that way. I'm sorry.
I'm tired, so don't talk to me.
He then took away my access to the card I used to shop online. He ignored me and all I said for the next 3 months. I didn't want to risk getting him angry by talking to him, so when Stuart was at work, I used my personal savings to buy us food. But of course, that money ran out eventually. When I checked my wallet at the peak of my despair, all I had was $5 inside. What could I do with this little money? At that moment, I heard the sound of the train from outside my window. Taking that money, I began to run to the station. With $5, I could go back home. When I made it back, I rang the doorbell. No one opened the door. At this time of the day, my mom was usually at work. I collapsed on the spot. Julia! As soon as she saw me, my mother rushed over. When I told her everything that had happened, my mom cried with me. Talking to someone about your problems really can help you feel better. The severity of my situation finally hit me. Why didn't I realize this before? At that moment, my phone rang.
Hey, you haven't prepared dinner. Where are you? Get home immediately.
Stuart's voice exploded into the phone speaker. My mom took my phone from my hand. My daughter passed away.
Huh?
Julia isn't coming back.
Mother-in-law?
You ignored her for the past 3 months, forced her to quit her job, and wouldn't give her any money to use for your daily needs, right? That's the equivalent of her being dead to you, isn't it?
No, that's not...
A person needs money to survive. Even little kids understand that much. My mom said that and hung up the phone. Of course, I wanted to get a divorce, but just that wasn't enough. But I didn't have any proof of what Stuart had done, so my mom and I prepared for war. Honestly, it's been super exciting. To find clues when Stuart wasn't around, I dug around for bank-related documents to check what's going on with our household money. Looking through the documents with my mom, we realized what was going on. 3 weeks of preparations later, my mom and I went to my in-laws' house.
Like mother, like daughter. Considering the way you've treated our son after leaving the house empty for the last 3 weeks, isn't getting a divorce natural?
My father-in-law even threatened that he had a lawyer ready. In that case, how about the way you raised your son? My mom snapped back. My mom's face was calm. My father-in-law was used to women like his wife, who always stood quietly behind their husbands, so he looked shocked to be spoken back to that way.
Isn't what you said to my husband going too far?
Surprisingly, the person who spoke up was Stuart's mother. Oh, someone who can't stand up to her husband or son doesn't have the right to speak up now. The room went silent. My mother-in-law's face went bright red. She wouldn't reply, but her whole body trembled. I promised you I would support Stuart, but Stuart has done nothing to support me or our life together.
That's because you're useless.
Stuart snickered as he spoke. Yeah, I also assumed it's because I'm useless. But not only have you ignored me for the last 3 months, but you forced me to pay for everything at home even though I was unemployed.
What?
My father-in-law was shocked.
Wait, what are you talking about? You've been able to buy expensive things even though you're unemployed. Isn't that thanks to Stuart's money?
No, that's not true. The last time you called me and told me that I should apologize and return the money, I thought something strange was going on. So I looked into things. I pulled out documents from my purse.
Where did you get these pictures from?
The photos showed Stuart acting very friendly with a young woman. There was even one of them entering a hotel together. He probably used the money on her. Among the documents I had prepared was our bank statement, which showed how our savings was decreasing, and photos of Stuart and his lover buying brand-name goods together.
No way! Stuart, what is this? You lied to me?
The recipient of my father-in-law's anger changed from me to Stuart.
And in the first place, how could you be selfish enough to not give money to your own wife?
My father-in-law was a company manager, so he was strict when it came to money.
What could I do when I didn't have money? If I didn't give my girlfriend presents, she'd get in a bad mood. And I only borrowed money from you twice, right? That's basically spare change for you.
Hearing that, the color of Stuart's father's face changed.
What are you saying? You asked me directly twice, but 4 other times through your mother. Huh?
Stuart and his father's stories were getting confusing. Looking at my mother-in-law, her face that was previously red from anger was now completely white.
No way. Did you also lie to me?
About that, I think this is the reason. It cost us a pretty penny, but my mom and I didn't just investigate Stuart. We looked into his parents as well. My father-in-law opened up the documents I had handed him with trembling hands, and photographs tumbled to the floor. There were photos of my mother-in-law speaking with a young man. In front of them was obviously expensive alcohol, and Stuart's mother was giggling like a young girl. My mother-in-law froze, breathless. Stuart was also confused, seeing this side of his mother that he didn't know. Stuart's father's face showed he felt like the world was crumbling down around him. Ah, this is the face I wanted to see. That probably wasn't good of me, but now I can finally move forward. That's what I thought.
Returning back to what we were saying, divorce and alimony for having an affair. We have recordings of abusive phone calls Julia received from her in-laws, so we will also be requesting compensation for emotional shock and damage. All of that is listed here, so please, look this over.
My lawyer explained in a quiet voice. The room went silent. The first person to break the silence was my father-in-law, though it didn't take him all that long.
Understood. I will follow all of Julia's demands. I will also pay for any fees she had to pay to collect this evidence. Dad! Stuart, Just sign this.
Stuart tried to complain, but his father would not back down. Like that, Stuart signed. In that case, we'll take our leave. I have a copy of all the documents, so I will give you a set. My mom and I got up to leave. Look through those documents carefully. You may have money and social standing, but think about whether you actually have the right to judge other families the way you do. My mom left those final words with my father-in-law.
I'm sorry that this happened after you entrusted us with your daughter.
Stuart's father stood up and apologized. Stuart was sulky until the very end. I later found out from my lawyer that Stuart had even stolen money from the family company out of desperation, and when his father found that out, he was chased out of the company. Stuart had no money and no job, so he was abandoned by his lover. If he wanted a woman like that, why did he get with me in the first place? I don't know what he's doing now, but I'm sure he can't afford to play around like he used to. It seems Stuart's parents got divorced. Stuart's father was a controlling man, but he left his wife in charge of the family finances. Thanks to that, she has secretly met more young men than we had thought. When Stuart's father found that out, he chased his wife out of the house as well. Stuart's mother had close to no work experience, so she couldn't stick to any jobs long term and ended up moving in with her relatives. Supposedly, even her relatives would get sick of her and chase her out. This was more than just a simple shock for my father-in-law. News about this spread through the company and even reached their clients. He ended up selling the company and using that money to pay my compensation. He no longer trusts people, so he's moved to the countryside and is living a secluded life. I ended up starting a new job at a travel agency. I used to work as a receptionist at a travel agency, but now I joined the planning department as a trip organizer. I've been focusing on planning trips that will bring smiles to the faces of people who are tired out by life. I want to be able to bring brightness back into people's lives.